Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone attending this kickoff conference of the second phase of the MSP Global 2.0 project. My name is Vinicius Lindoso. I'm Communication Officer for the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission of UNESCO, the IOC-UNESCO, and I'm very pleased to be here with you today across the world, I think, with participants to moderate today's event and to talk about marine spatial planning and building the knowledge and collaborations that we need for MSP in this very important context, of the Sustainable Development Goals, the 2030 Agenda, and several other global agendas that we are trying to pursue. MSP Global 2.0 is a project implemented by the IOC of UNESCO, as most of you may know, co-funded by the European Union. Before we start today's pretty packed event, I would like to introduce some housekeeping information. First of all, to make sure that everyone is included in today's event, we have provided interpretation in French, Spanish, and English. So you can select your preferred language in the little globe button icon that you can see on the bottom bar of your Zoom. French, English, and Spanish are the languages provided as interpretation for today's event. And we'll be taking your questions throughout the session through a platform called Slido. Now, if you are not familiar with the Slido platform, please don't panic. It's really easy to use. There's no downloading, no installing anything. Just go to slido.com and enter our event code, which you can see up on the screen, MSP Global 2. Again, I repeat, MSP Global 2. We'll keep reminding you of this information in the Zoom chat. Speaking of the Zoom chat, please do not send questions to speakers via the Zoom chat. We'll be keeping that chat mostly for any problems that you may experience throughout the conference. And if you do have questions, please keep them coming via Slido. If you do have questions about how to use Slido, please feel free, of course, to post those in the Zoom chat, and we'll come back to you. We've got a really strong team working with us behind the scenes. We'll make sure that you can smoothly participate in all of the event. I apologize in advance for those sending questions. We may not be able to get to every question that we receive via Slido. We have a pretty tight program today, but they are important. They are a great tool for the MSP Global team to identify your priorities, your questions, your concerns in this new phase of the project. So please do send your questions. And regardless of whether we actually get to them today, they will be really useful in informing the process going forward. So I think we can start now with the first session of today's program, which is a welcome to MSP Global 2.0 after a really successful first phase of the project. We are ready for more. And to kick off the event, we're going to be hearing some opening remarks from the two organizations that have co-organized the event. That's the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission of UNESCO, represented here today through a video by the Executive Secretary of IOC, Vladimir Ryabinin, also Assistant Director-General of UNESCO, and following by some opening words by Ms. Delilah Al Khudhairy, Director for Marine Policy and Blue Economy at the Directorate-General for Maritime Affairs and Fisheries at the European Commission. So if we can start with the video by Dr. Vladimir Ryabinin, IOC, UNESCO.
Ladies and gentlemen, let me greet you on behalf of the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission of UNESCO, which is basically the home of ocean sciences and the United Nations system, to the start of the kickoff conference on the MSP 2.0. We all know that ocean needs to be managed sustainably, and we have been all engaged in MSP for more than 2 decades. And the MSP actually turned into operational framework for developing sustainable ocean economy, giving it opportunity to actually use the ocean resources, but also conserve the ocean and sometimes restore the ocean. And most coastal countries are now participating in the MSP work. So this work is actually a core work for IOC, because IOC is now moving from basically supporting science focused on curiosity to the science that is needed for sustainable management of the ocean. So we played a significant role, I have to say, in promoting developing guidance on all the aspects of MSP. This is also important that, we have the whole value chain, starting with observations, research, services, that manifests actually in the management of the ocean using MSP. In that case, I have to say that the European Commission and DG MARE have been a fantastic partner, a key partner for us, and we designed a common framework to accelerate MSP, which is called MSP Global. This initiative was co-designed by both institutions. The word co-design is very critical here. And now we need to continue to operationalize this roadmap. During the first phase of the project, we achieved a lot. First of all, impressive numbers, 5,000 different stakeholders in over 140 countries. And this is almost the same number of countries that have access to the coast of the ocean. We developed also UNESCO IC European Commission MSP Global Guide. We published more than 15 technical reports, policy brief, and capacity development was spearheaded in many places, but particularly for the pilot areas, in that case, in the first phase of the project, in the Western Mediterranean and also Southeastern Pacific. So now we're moving to the second phase. We have to implement a lot of actions of the MSP roadmap, and then we need also, of course, continue to contributing to the Sustainable Development Agenda. But now we have also on board the United Nations Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development. This takes us to a totally different league, because the around 50 different programs of the decade, the largest undertaking in ocean sciences ever, will be on our side. So what we have to do would be basically develop further, elaborate more the tools, capacity development for practitioners, for the stakeholders. This has to be done worldwide. Now we live, and everyone understands this now very strongly now, we live in the world with climate change, so we have to develop climate smart MSP processes. We have also our new very well formulated biodiversity conservation targets, and we have to make sure that they're based on all based on the best available science. So the idea now is to continue our pilots. These transboundary pilots will, during the second phase of the project, will be done in the Gulf of Guinea in the Western Pacific. So, ladies and gentlemen, I have to say that we are doing a very important job for the ocean. We are creating the future for the civilization. And I would like to say this is only possible because we understand that the modern leadership is in partnership. In that sense, I would like to really thank the European Commission for, first of all, of course, funding the MSP Global, organizing this kickoff event for the MSP 2.0, but also for being truly a dear partner in the process of moving MSP forward globally in the world, not only in Europe. So I would like to thank all collaborators, internal, external collaborators for the project, for the conference, and let's wish you a very good conference, very fruitful discussions, and we all are creating the ocean we need for the future we want. So once again, good luck and many thanks from IOC.
And those were some words from the Executive Secretary of the IOC of UNESCO, who unfortunately wasn't able to be here with us today, but was, very certain to send in some great opening words for this event. And now I'd like to welcome Ms. Delilah Al Khudhairy, who is here with us this morning. Again, Director for Maritime Policy and Blue Economy in the European Commission's DG MARE. Delilah, over to you.
Thank you, Lindoso, and the very kind words also of Dr. Ryabinin. Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and dear esteemed colleagues. It is also my great pleasure to also welcome you to the opening conference of the MSP Global 2.0 project. And today, as Dr. Ryabinin has already mentioned, we're here gathered to discuss, through initiatives like the Marine Spatial Planning Roadmap and MSP Global, how we are advancing maritime spatial planning around the world and how we are moving towards our target to have at least 1/3 of the global maritime areas under national jurisdictions with marine spatial planning. Important and key target for us all to work towards. And as you've already heard this morning from Dr. Ryabinin, the MSP Global 2.0 project is really an excellent collaboration effort and work between the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission of UNESCO and also the European Commission. It reflects the reality that the ocean and the seas don't have borders, and that the EU needs not only to promote sustainable development and effective management of our seas and coastal areas within the EU, but very importantly, also beyond, all around the world, all around the globe. And the European Union's support to promote the use of MSP and related processes by the non-EU countries, and also at international level, in line with Sustainable Development Goal 14, life below water, is highlighted importantly in the EU's international ocean governance agenda, which basically says that building an ecosystem-based approach through maritime spatial planning can support, as we've just heard from Dr. Ryabinin, the conservation and restoration targets and contribute towards a sustainable blue economy. And the EU has also gained significant experience alongside UNESCO in this domain. And we are working, as Dr. Ryabinin underlined, really excellently and closely together with the IOC-UNESCO in promoting this internationally. Now, this new stage, this new phase of MSP Global 2.0 follows the adoption of our new 5-year joint roadmap, which we adopted together last November in Barcelona. And this new phase of MSP Global is going to enable us to implement several actions that we have outlined in the MSP roadmap. And the MSP Global is going to also enable the implementation of international guidelines and tools that have been developed in the previous phase of MSP Global, to implement this at national, but importantly also regional levels, as well as development of further tools on MSP. Now, the MSP Global also intends to strengthen the global community of MSP practitioners and contribute to specific tailored capacity needs on MSP, and very importantly also further enhance the integration, as we've just heard, of climate, biodiversity conservation, and importantly also socioeconomic, social dimensions into the national and transboundary MSP processes. So the project will also continue the tradition of the International Fora for Maritime Spatial Planners, otherwise better known by all of you and by all of us as the MSP Forums. And the next edition is going to be already the 6th edition of the MSP Forum. And the MSP Forum really plays an important key role in enabling, facilitating this important knowledge exchange between all the MSP practitioners and stakeholders from all around the world. And after all, this is what our joint roadmap and MSP Global 2.0 project is all about. It's about fostering international cooperation, knowledge exchange, and experiences. And by bringing together experts and policymakers and stakeholders from all around the world, and in turn, we are learning from each other's experiences and best practices. And this collaboration is, of course, essential because what it means is that we're addressing together the complex challenges that arise from the increasing demands and the pressures that we see are growing also on our seas and oceans and coastal areas all around the world. And during the course of this conference, we are going to have the opportunity to deep dive into the various aspects of MSP. We're going to touch upon some of the issues that lie at the heart of the MSP Global 2.0, like marine conservation, the importance of data, climate adaptation, transboundary cooperation, and the incorporation, very importantly also, of indigenous peoples' knowledge. And now it's my turn to also express the immense gratitude to UNESCO IOC for your dedication, commitment also to to the idea of advancing MSP globally together with us. And we're really glad to contribute as well and be part of this excellent collaboration that's been ongoing since a number of years now. And I'd like to also extend my appreciation to all the participants today and speakers and organizers, and also those of you who have not been able to make it, to make possible to the success of MSP Global 2.0, but also very importantly to the successful conference that we're going to all have together today. So without further ado, let us embark on our journey of cooperation and knowledge exchange. Remember to have fun, and thank you once again very much for joining us and being part of this successful, important conference today. Thank you very much. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Delilah. Thank you for those very inspiring words this morning. And particularly as we now embark onto hearing about the project itself and what it means and how we're going to be building and accelerating further on the basis of the first phase of the project. So I'd like to invite Michele Quesada da Silva, who's a project coordinator for MSP Global 2.0 from the IOC of UNESCO. And she will tell us all. Michele, over to you.
Thank you, Vinicius, for the introduction, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you who are connected today for this kickoff conference. I'm really happy to be here today to start this new phase of the project and present you a very brief introduction of what we are planning for the project. So next slide, please. So both opening remarks mentioned the joint initiatives between IOC and the European Commission. I'm bringing here just a visual to illustrate that. It's always easier for us to understand the big picture with some visuals. So IOC and the European Commission organized both the second and the third international conference on MSP. And during these conferences, we launched the MSP roadmap, which is our common framework with some priority topics and priority actions for us. And the main goal, the main target of this framework is to support the achievement of covering at least 1/3 of the global maritime areas under national jurisdictions with marine spatial plans by 2030, as we know that MSP usually covers the whole maritime territory of a country. And next, please. So to implement the actions of this framework, we have the MSP Global project. The project, both the first and second phase, we always have 2 levels of work. So at global level, we develop knowledge tools to support MSP practitioners. And then at regional level, we have transboundary pilots, so we can work together with beneficiary countries that are sharing the same sea basin to help them to advance their MSP process. And we also have the MSP Forum, our community of practice. We had already 5 editions of this forum, and more will come. And next slide. So here you have the idea of the main topics of the updated MSP roadmap, which was launched last year during the 3rd International Conference in Barcelona. So we have 3 cross-cutting pillars: knowledge support for MSP, capacity development and awareness, transboundary cooperation, and then 3 thematic pillars: climate-smart marine spatial planning, marine protection and restoration, and sustainable blue economy. Then for each of these pillars, we have specific actions that I invite you to check later in case you are not familiar yet with the actions of the roadmap. And next. So MSP Global 2.0, it's a 1.5-year project. The project was designed based on the theory of change. So first, we define what's the desired impact that the project wants to contribute. And since the first phase, what we want to contribute is mainly with the SDG 14, but specifically we have the target 14.2, which is related to sustainably manage and protect marine and coastal ecosystems. And then from our side, we want to contribute to this impact through marine spatial planning, both at national level as a national policy, but as well to improve the regional ocean governance, because as mentioned before by DG MARE, the ocean has no boundaries, and it's very important that the countries that share the same sea basin, they have a dialogue among them, so their plans, they are coherent across borders. And this will be the topic of our session 2 today. So we will discuss more about the target 14.2 of the SDG 14. And then next slide, please. So as I mentioned, MSP Global always works at global and regional level. At global level, our expected outcome at the end of the project is to contribute to well-informed MSP practitioners and stakeholders supporting the MSP process of their respective countries. And at regional level, this time we will support 2 new regions, with the Gulf of Guinea in West Africa and the Western Pacific. Next slide. So our key outputs and activities at a global level, they are divided in the development of knowledge and tools, and capacities and awareness. Regarding the knowledge and tools, what we are planning is to have some strategic workshops about specific topics related to MSP. I will detail them in my next slide. And then during these workshops with experts and stakeholders related to these topics, sorry, the previous slide. Yeah, this one, keep this one. And so during these workshops with these experts, we will stimulate a discussion to think about further guidance that it's important for MSP practitioners. And we will, with this information, we will produce new tools related to MSP. So to be a way to complement the MSP Global Guide that was developed in the first phase of the project. Regarding capacities and awareness, we will assess global capacity needs on MSP. So these will be inputs for further projects and activities led by IOC and DG MARE. We will develop an MSP Global online training based on the MSP Global Guide. This training will be a self-paced training. It will be available and free to anyone interested in MSP. It will be available in the Ocean Teacher Global Academy, which is an online platform, which is also an initiative from IOC-UNESCO. We will co-organize together with DG MARE, of course, the next edition of the MSP Forum, the International MSP Forum. This will happen next year, and we really hope that we can soon tell you when and where it will be the next MSP Forum. And of course, we will keep communicating and disseminating MSP. Next slide. So here you have an idea about the MSP related topics that we will work in this new phase. So the tools that we will develop. So first, we will develop a web tool to monitor the MSP roadmap target. So to have the big picture of the countries that have approved marine spatial plans. We are developing a rapid assessment methodology based on the MSP Global Guide. The idea of this methodology is to support the beneficiary countries where we are working to identify what they have already done regarding MSP and also what they still need to do to advance their process. This is the objective of this methodology. We will develop good practice on engaging indigenous peoples and local communities, and this is one of the topics that we will start discussing today in session 5. We will also develop some data toolbox on how to develop a spatial data infrastructure for MSP, how to integrate ocean observation into MSP, and we will discuss that today during session 3. We will also have tools for a specific users, so to understand how MSP is connected with other policies. So for instance, we will start with 2 playbooks or handbooks in this second phase of the project, one about MSP and offshore wind energy, and another one on MSP and marine protection and restoration. And last but not least, we want to develop a guide on climate smart MSP, a specific guide about that. We already started to talk about climate smart MSP in the MSP Global Guide, but this is an emerging topic. There's still a lot to discuss about that. So the idea is to provide further guidance to MSP practitioners to ensure that the marine spatial plans around the world, they are taking into account climate change. And next slide. So to finalize my presentation, at regional level, we will have national and regional activities. We will have 4 beneficiary countries in each region that we are working now. The idea is to implement the methodology, the rapid assessment that we will develop in these 4 countries, and also to organize some national activities, some trainings using the MSP Challenge board game that some of you might be already familiar. It's the tool that we are using in our trainings since 2018. And we will also have some national workshops. The countries that are already confirmed that they will be a beneficiary their interest to be a beneficiary country of the project, it's in the Gulf of Guinea, Benin, Ghana, and Togo, and the Western Pacific, Thailand is already confirmed. Then at the regional level, the project will work together with existing initiatives. The idea is that the project foster existing initiatives that are happening at the regional level. So in the Gulf of Guinea, we will work together with the Abidjan Convention Secretariat, and in the Western Pacific, we will work together with the IOC Subcommission for the Western Pacific. Specifically, they have an ocean decade action. So some of you may know that we have the UN Ocean Decade for Sustainable Development, and this decade it's organized in actions. So people they can propose actions to contribute to this decade, and the IOC Subcommission submitted an action to accelerate MSP in the region. So MSP Global will support this decade action, and this is what we will discuss in session 4 today. Next slide. So with that, I close my presentation. It's just to give you an idea about what we are planning and how this is connected with the sessions that we are having today. And I would like to highlight that what we are really looking for in this second phase of the project is to build knowledge and collaborations. We are looking for synergies with other initiatives so we can really advance MSP together. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Michele. Thank you very much for giving us a brief introduction to MSP Global 2.0. Now, in the interest of time, we'll skip questions to after the panel in session 2. And I see that there's a couple of questions already on Slido, but I think we should press forward. And we'll come to them at the end of the panel. I think it mixes in well with talking about accelerating marine spatial planning as we're behind schedule to sustainably manage and protect marine and coastal ecosystems, which is what we're going to talk about right now, talking about what the impact of MSP Global 2.0 can and hopefully will be within the broader context of achieving and monitoring the Sustainable Development Goal 14 and its target 14.2, which is to sustainably manage and protect marine and coastal ecosystems, and the indicator for which is how many countries are using ecosystem-based approaches to and ocean governance approaches to do just that. So I'd like to remind everyone that if you start entering your questions via Slido during the panel, please do address them to specific speakers to facilitate discussion. You can put that, within your question, which speaker it is directed to, or if it's a more generic question. Thanks a lot for making at least my life a little easier. I will now introduce the speakers for this session, this panel session, starting with Julien Barbier, the head of Marine Policy and Regional Coordination section, and also the coordinator of the Ocean Decade at the IOC of UNESCO. Felix Leinemann, head of unit for Blue Economy sectors, aquaculture, and maritime spatial planning at the European Commission's DG MARE. Olo Vestergaard, program management officer at UNEP, the UN Environment Program, on working on Sustainable Blue Economy Initiative. Elena Rodriguez, Ocean Policy Officer at the WWF European Policy Office. And after the panel will be joined by video, pre-recorded video, by Joe Appiah, who's the coordinator for Marine, Coastal, and Island Biodiversity at the Secretariat of the Convention on Biological Diversity. So if I could jump straight into the heart of the discussion with Julien and Elena, why should countries select MSP as an approach to sustainably manage and protect marine and coastal ecosystems? What are the key advantages of this type of policy compared to others? Why MSP?
Who should start, Vinny?
Julien, you go ahead. You got the ball.
Okay.
Run with it.
Okay. All right. I've got the ball. Okay. Thank you. And good to see all our friends online. And I'm very excited to be here for this start of a new chapter together with our colleagues from the European Commission in the form of MSPglobal. So to address your question, Vinny, I think there is clearly a realization from nations around the world that in order to harness the potential of sustainable marine economic development, whilst also ensuring the conservation and the restoration of ecosystems, and for that we have now very strong global targets that needs to translate at national level, we need a different approach from the traditional sectoral management, and that spirit is very much embedded in the SDG targets. So I think we're really talking about the change of paradigm, from going to individual species to looking at ecosystems. We're looking at multiple scales from local, national, but also in the transboundary context. I think we're talking about processes that also have a long-term perspective about, the planning process and the benefits that are arising from marine spatial planning. I think the importance of integrating human in all parts of the process is so important. Humans are part of ecosystems, and therefore we need really a multi-sectoral approach to create that integration. And to do that, we also need very strong participatory process with all sectors at the table, but also communities being part of that discussion. I think the MSP also needs to be driven by science and in order to inform adaptive management and address some of the changes we are seeing in the marine environment. So overall, I think the benefits of MSP probably could be organized around 4 areas. One is really to reduce conflicts among different users, and we know that our coastal spaces and our marine areas are becoming more and more crowded with different demands for spatial use. Renewable energy is certainly one that is creating a lot of demand in many areas of the world, and very often triggers the need for MSP. I think we also need to have better predictability and certainty in the marine environment. We know that change is already happening, partly and mainly due to climate change, and policy makers, private sectors that are operating in those areas need to understand what the future looks like. And to do that, we really need a process to plan. I think MSP can also deliver compatible uses, so really optimizing the marine space, considering the ecosystem characteristics, whilst also ensuring critical preservation of those services. But I think those benefits, we still need to have strong evidence and I would really call on our community globally to really help us to document the benefits of MSP so that we can really convince and engage more countries in engaging. But of course, to do that, we need monitoring frameworks, we need evaluation processes that can really measure the effectiveness of MSP. Now, we're not in a bad shape. I mean, I think MSP started as a concept about 20 years ago. And over those last 2 decades, and thanks to MSP Global, we reported last year that we have about 300 MSP initiatives in over 102 countries that are already, emerging. And most of those are government-led, but also a lot of them are still in a kind of piloting phases. So it's only 38 countries around the world that actually have approved plan. So I think there is certainly more efforts required. I think we also have political momentum. I want to highlight also the work of a high-level panel on ocean sustainability and the move towards managing 100% of national areas. And this is, of course, a focus of those 17 countries. So to wrap up, I think they are global efforts, and this is really where a project like MSP Global can really be useful in really helping us to document what are the best practices, in creating collaboration, but also in delivering new tools and guidance that the MSP community needs. And I think Michelle highlighted what is our ambition there. But to do that, we will need collaboration, and we will need your support. So I just want to stop here, but yeah, over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Julian. And Elena, speaking of collaboration, looking sort of broader at the ocean policy sphere, what's your take? What does MSP bring us in this very momentous time for the ocean?
Thank you very much for having me. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm Delilah Al Khudhairy. I work for WWF, and I'm the lead author of WWF's assessments of the implementation of maritime spatial plans in Europe. For us at WWF, maritime spatial planning is a wonderful policy tool that can help address some of the challenges that we have right now in developing a sustainable blue economy. As a policy tool, it takes both space and time into consideration when allocating the different areas for different maritime activities, including nature restoration and conservation. Obviously, there are different approaches to maritime spatial plan, but at WWF, we believe that an ecosystem-based approach, which was already raised by DG MARE in this conference, is the best way forward because it takes into account the ecosystem's ability to carry for human activities, and it also takes into account climate change, among other problems. So the main idea behind our work and why we believe the MSP is a great tool is that it helps connect sectoral policies. So for example, you may have conservation policies, you may have energy policies, and these usually work in silos. So MSP can act as a forum in which different stakeholders come together to not only plan for the future, but also understand what are the challenges and conflicts currently happening at sea. Obviously, there's still a lot of knowledge to be developed regarding marine science, regarding the health of our marine ecosystems, and this is a key aspect of MSP, which is this adaptive strategy or this adaptive framework in which plans are not set in stone, they are meant to evolve, and it's always better to have something and work from that. This is also a key priority for us when we advocate for the implementation of the Maritime Spatial Planning Directive in the EU and across the world as well. So for us, MSP should act on 4 different streams, which are very much aligned with what Julian already mentioned, but it is this nature component on the conservation and preservation of marine ecosystems, but also taking into account the impact of climate change and blue carbon or marine mammal corridors. And then there's also the socioeconomic aspects. It has to do with the different industries working at sea. For example, renewable energy, as already been mentioned, it's an emerging and expanding sector. And it is of interest to everyone to secure space for the renewable energy transition. And obviously, good MSP cannot happen without good ocean governance, and this has to do with the stakeholder engagement, with how science is included in the process, what type of information is included, and whether also as a tool, if it is well aligned with other policies that exist at the national, regional, or local level. And to finalize, obviously, a good plan is also a comprehensive plan. It takes account not only what we already know, but the science that will be developed in the coming years as more and more is known about the ocean. We also need to adapt our strategies, and we need to make sure that the different sectors and all stakeholders, including coastal communities, are part of the solution. And for us, this is key. And this is also what WWF hopes to bring to the table to this MSP Global Initiative, the knowledge that we gathered regarding the implementation of MSP, but also what our experts, both in policy and conservation on the field in the different countries, can understand from their experiences and the knowledge they have about their local contexts.
Thank you, Elena. Thank you very much. Now I have another question, maybe this time for you, Ole. We're talking about accelerating marine spatial planning. What's the focus? What should be the priority focus as we look in this current decade and beyond? What roles to be played, national, regional, international institutions like the UN system, like the European Union? Over to you for your inputs on that.
Thank you very much, and hello all. It's good to see you. I'm Ole Vestergaard, Unit Marine Program based in Nairobi. Let me take the opportunity to thank IOC-UNESCO and DJ MARE for putting in place this phase 2 of the MSP Global and inviting our input to this panel. Yeah, so just a question. I think it's important to consider we face really a triple planetary crisis in the ocean of climate change, nature loss, and pollution. And we also know the task ahead of us. More than ever, we need joined up policy approaches to ensure long-term environmental sustainable use of ocean, the primary assets of healthy coral reefs, mangroves, salt marsh, and so forth. And we must also mitigate the very fast increasing cumulative impacts of many human activities, both sea-based and land-based. And I'm very much in line with my previous panelists in terms of building integration and generate multiple benefits. We see that investments in ocean management can provide 5 times return in economic, but particularly environmental and human health benefits. And this includes valuable blue carbon solutions to deliver the Paris Agreement. So now as we move into this phase 2, I think we must put the benefit of MSP really into practice. And there are some challenges to consider. We must seek policy coherence and align various sector aspirations and needs. And we must really now connect institutions, stakeholders, legislation, and finance more effectively. And we must learn from practice and past failures. For example, could we rethink or even innovate a more practical policy coherent approach that can support stronger MSP processes? Can we move from narrow sector by sector maritime policies to instead set practical objectives for maybe nested policy areas across competing sectors in order to really achieve true sustainability of oceans and work around common objectives like human health benefits, coastal resilience, and so forth. I think also it's important to note that MSP processes can benefit from stronger early or upstream policy steer from policymakers, decision makers to guide and overcome challenges that we see in the actual plan implementation. Otherwise, I think we are running the risk that unresolved conflicts and tensions, they emerge in the action of implementing MSP. UNEP has developed an approach to design integrated policy frameworks for sustainable economic transition, which feeds into MSP processes, and we would be interested in collaborating with partners here in phase 2 to see how we could further that framework and apply it in practice. I think we can realize many benefits and efficiencies from direct interministerial coordination and spatial planning, but we also need to be realistic and practical. We need practical formats for governance. We need direct collaboration across departments, agencies, building coherent legislation and information management systems. And we need also be a little bit pragmatic about the tools that we have. And even if we are not able to put a specific economic value on an ocean asset or resource, it's still useful to map the potential ecosystem services in the plan. So a more pragmatic approach to some of the tool and get into the real work. Essentially, you need to treat ecosystem conservation as a sector alongside other ocean maritime sectors, basically giving nature a seat at the table. And I welcome the focus here in phase 2 on MSP and protection and conservation and restoration and blue economy. This means, for instance, we are enabling zoning of larger marine areas to sustain biodiversity and ecosystem functions. This must feed into policy coherence analysis and guide investments and benefit sharing models. And lastly, to say that UNEP has done some exciting work, some pilot work with our colleagues at Commonwealth Blue Charter Program to develop what we call a blue economy readiness assessment to help countries get started on blue economy transition. And I think it does sound relevant and similar to the MSP rapid assessment that we just heard about. And again, maybe some scope for collaboration there, including cross-government approaches to identify the visioning, facilitate inclusive dialogues, and in turn feed that into marine spatial planning. So we are very happy to continue this collaboration and partnership and looking forward to the further conversation. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Ole. And straight into that, you've given us a broad framework, and now I'd like to dig into the key aspects, indicators that we can use to evaluate the effectiveness of marine spatial planning. And for that, Felix, maybe you could hop in on the discussion. What would you like to see as the evidence that MSP is contributing to sustainably managing and protecting marine and coastal ecosystems?
Thank you, Vinicius, and hello, everyone. It's great to be back at MSP Global. Why do we do MSP? Because we are seeing an increasing use of our seas, and that is exercising an enormous amount of pressure on the environment there. And that's why I've chosen this background picture also, because there are a lot of things that are happening. In the European Union, we have in 2021 adopted what we called a new approach to a sustainable blue economy, where we want to really apply the principles of the European Green Deal also in the blue economy. And that means we need to transform the way we do business at sea in many different ways, along many different strands. And that's decarbonization, like offshore wind, or decarbonizing shipping. It is biodiversity and coastal resilience, like building with nature, protecting and restoring ecosystems. It's responsible food systems as well. So we have this whole nexus of energy, food, and nature that we want to take from the sea, and we want to give to the sea as well. And this is so those are maybe some indicators of how MSP, how I would consider MSP to be successful if we can deliver on those 3 elements and in a joint way and in working together. We will come maybe later to how we collaborate. We have developed a so-called toolbox on monitoring and assessing maritime spatial plans. It's available on the EU MSP platform. It's not in MSP Global, but this is also freely available. I'll put the link in the chat later. And there you can really select, in this toolbox, you can select your different objectives and then measure how you for reviewing your plans, once you put them in place, how you have actually reached different objectives. We have another piece of legislation in Europe, which is the Marine Strategy Framework Directive. It's the environmental legislation, which has the objective to come to good environmental status of all the EU waters. And there also we have indicators, and we can compare the baseline from before the plans and after the plans. So there are elements of evidence that I would like to see, and that I think can be chosen to monitor the plans and assess them.
Great, that's very, very useful, I think, within the context of this discussion. And I'd like to ask Ole, we're talking about how to use MSP for contributing to SDG 14.2. How has SDG target 14.2 being evaluated and reported. If I could just ask you to keep response really tight because we're running very short of time, and so we can get to Joe's video and the questions. Thank you.
No, thanks for that. Just briefly to recall that SDG 14.2 is about sustainable managing and protecting marine and coastal ecosystems. And the specific indicator 14.2 is a promotion of national exclusive economic zone managed using ecosystem approach. So in practice, the measure for achieving this indicator is really twofold. It's about implementation of coastal zone management, and it's about development and implementation of marine spatial planning. So therefore, all this work on MSP and how we monitor the progress is really central to delivering on SDG 14.2. We have produced some guidance. I'll share also that in the chat on how we measure that in the detailed numbers. But I think just to, even if we are tight, to recall that we have similar targets now. We have the Global Biodiversity Framework Target 1, talk about spatial management. We have ambition of a high-level ocean panel for 100%, sustainable ocean plans. So we really need to build synergies, and when we do these indicators and data systems, we need to be effective and link them up. But there are some two fundamental questions around this. I think firstly we need to ask ourselves: is MSP actually delivering protection outcomes of ecosystems, and are we addressing important biodiversity areas and ecological integrity for real? What's the current baseline? What are the measures and targets at country level to be able to track this progress? Are all MSP processes considering conservation ecosystems fully? Or if MSP is primarily facilitating zoning of maritime uses, then we need to evaluate and consider if it's actually delivering against Sustainable Goal 14.2. Another practical question is, we talk about planning, but to what extent are we moving into the implementation of those plans? We have earlier done some work trying to assess how countries are moving from the plan into the actual implementation, and we saw very little progress, and we saw a number of barriers and also some enabling actions that need to be put in place. And I think that is what we can look at here in phase 2. And indeed, UNEP is planning now to do a follow-up study we did 10 years ago. We looked at MSP in practice, moving from planning to implementation. We are going to revisit that study here 10 years later with all these plans that has been developed, including through this nice portfolio here, and dive more into some of those challenges and see where are the countries really delivering sustainable development goals. So we would look forward to take that forward in MSP, and I think some of the frameworks and some of the directives of the EC, for instance, Green Deal and others, lend itself to important lessons and can be also learning from other global regions. Thanks.
Terrific. Thanks, Ole, for giving us this perspective on SDG 14.2. Now to wrap up, before we hear from Joe at CBD, a little question to the group, to the panel. What kinds of collaboration are missing to accelerate MSP? Elena, over to you.
From WWF's assessment, what we see is that even when stakeholder engagement is well conducted at the national level, there's still some links missing in the cross-boundary aspects. So the connection and the cooperation between different countries that fall within, for example, the same sea or the same regional space. For us, this is a problem because obviously the ocean and the sea does not necessarily follow human borders, and marine ecosystems can be affected by risks happening across member states' borders. And for us, this is a key aspect that we need to consider moving forward, is how well member states or national maritime spatial plans align with each other, and how the regional and the international perspective is well taken into account in the national plans themselves. So for us, I think this is a key aspect that moving forward, it's essential to develop.
Thank you. Who would like to weigh in on that question? Julian?
Yeah, I can come in, Vinny. I think to me, there's 2 or 3 areas where we really need to strengthen the collaboration. One of them, of course, is science innovation and the way we generate data to inform MSP processes. And of course, coming from a scientific organization, I think IOC is well placed to create that dialogue. But there are fundamental research questions that need further investments. If you look at the issue of multiple stressors and how they interact with each other and affect ecosystem services, I think we need science there. But we also need to be able to provide and recommend tools for mitigating some of those stressors within the MSP process. That also leads, of course, to data and observation, and we are seeing great improvement in the way we are observing our ocean through different means. And I think we are seeing also new capacities in terms of modeling, in terms of forecasting and coming up with ocean predictions, which could really be a strong asset for guiding and monitoring implementation of MSP. Socioeconomic data, I think there's still an area where we need more collaboration to better measure the value of those ecosystem services to communities. And I think the Ocean Science Decade, hopefully will help to identify those cooperation and deliver these kind of new kind of services that and knowledge that we need to inform MSP. The other areas, and I think Ellen mentioned that transboundary cooperation, and this is something which is very much embedded in the MSP roadmap that we have. I think this is an essential mechanism to really create a joint vision amongst the nations that are sharing a common ocean body. And starting from a technical level is often is easier, I would say, to create this common vision and providing a technical cooperation mechanism for data sharing, for example, but also sharing experiences. And I think as we do this, it's very important that we embed this in existing regional organizations that have a mandate and that can really nurture this cooperation. And this is why, for example, we're very pleased to work with the Abidjan Convention in the framework of the MSPglobal too. And then finally, I think communication. We need collaboration in those areas. We know that MSP is a complex process, and there is a danger that sometimes MSP processes are not inclusive, and that ends up having communities that are not actually on board and do not own the decision of MSP process. So for that, we really need to have the right tools so that we come up with socially acceptable solutions, and that stakeholders have that ownership. So I think MSP Forum and the different tools that we are going to develop in the framework of a project will hopefully help to advance those collaborations.
Wonderful. Felix, any thoughts?
Just briefly, we have developed communities of practice and are supporting those at sea basin level. And that's something which may respond to what Helena identified as missing. We have a community of practice being developed in the North and Baltic Sea, for example. We set up one for the Mediterranean in Europe. And that's something where really it is possible to engage the different sectors also in co-creating maritime spatial plans and in contributing to that. I'm not saying that this is functioning perfectly. It's something that is in the making, that you need to, again, communicate and invite people to join. But that's maybe an element that is at the same time missing, but coming and being created.
Wonderful. And Ole, some very final thoughts before we jump into Joe's message.
Thanks for that. I agree with our panelists. Perhaps one more thing is that the ocean issues are becoming way more mainstream here since 20 years ago that MSP started. So there's a much wider community of interest and stakeholders, and the whole ocean climate community, CCC, the whole biodiversity community. So just to say that there's an opportunity and perhaps a need for the MSP sort of converted to look beyond its traditional sort of networks and communities and really reach out and can have a much more engagement and perhaps much more impact now going forward, and bring ocean into the sort of solution space via MSP processes. Thanks.
Terrific. And being a communicator myself, I couldn't agree more with the emphasis on communication. This is part of the process being here with everyone across the world. I've seen people from many countries. Now I'd like to call on the video by Joe Appiott from the CBD. He's the coordinator for Marine, Coastal, and Island Biodiversity. Over to Joe via pre-recorded video.
Greetings, friends and colleagues. My name is Joe Appiott from the Secretariat of the Convention on Biological Diversity, and I'm pleased to give a very brief presentation on the importance of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework as a new catalyst for biodiversity-inclusive spatial planning. Very much wish that I could be there with you in person, but nonetheless greatly appreciate the indulgence of our colleagues in IOC-UNESCO to allow me to transmit this recorded presentation. Now, as many of you know, we had a very important and historic moment in a snowy December in Montreal last year in the form of the adoption of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. This framework is perhaps the most ambitious set of global goals and targets for nature that we've ever seen, and was crafted deliberately along the lines of a set of outcome-oriented goals and action-oriented targets. The goals, which are set by 2050, with a deadline of 2050, focused on different aspects of outcomes that we wish to see, both for the state of ecosystems and biodiversity, as well as the services they provide to sustainable development and for peoples and communities around the world. The action-oriented targets, which have a 2030 deadline, are organized according to the themes of reducing threats to biodiversity, meeting people's needs through sustainable use and benefit sharing, and the tools and solutions for implementation and mainstreaming. Now, Target 1, of course, is of most interest for us, and this focuses on spatial planning and/or effective management processes addressing land and sea use change. But it focuses on there's a few key important elements of this, and these include the participatory, integrated, and biodiversity inclusive nature of spatial planning, as well as an objective of bringing the loss of areas of high biodiversity importance, including ecosystems of high ecological integrity, close to zero by 2030, and of course respecting the rights of indigenous peoples and local communities. Now, this is important because we know, many of us, and all of us really know, that marine spatial planning is a tool that can and indeed should be used to achieve a whole range of conservation and sustainable use and development objectives. But it was a very important priority for the parties to emphasize the focus on reducing the loss of areas of high biodiversity importance. I wanted to quickly note also that the Secretariat has recently posted on our website a set of quick guides for each of the Global Biodiversity Framework targets, including for Target 1. Another important aspect that I wish to note is the importance of seeing all of the targets in concert and in a comprehensive manner, and the importance of spatial planning as a foundation and as a basis for many of the other targets. Of course, this is not news to us, but this was very much clear in the minds of parties in the development of the framework, and this is very much a reason why this is the first target. And it will indeed be an important foundational target for implementing Target 2 on restoration, Target 3, the famous 30 by 30 target, and the whole range of other targets in the framework itself. Indeed, the importance of a comprehensive and holistic approach was emphasized throughout the process to develop the framework, and is something that will have to be kept in mind very carefully as we move forward in implementation of the framework, and as we use marine spatial planning as a basis to do that. So thank you. I apologize for the brevity of these remarks, but certainly happy to follow up with any questions or any additional information that may be helpful for your discussions. Thank you.
Just heard some words from Joe Appiott, the coordinator for Marine, Coastal, and Island Biodiversity from the CBD Secretariat. Thanks, Joe, for sending the video, even though he couldn't be here. We're going to turn to Slido now and get our most voted question from Juan Ronco. Should we still treat conservation as a sector? In a strong sustainability MSP, ecosystem-based conservation has to be integrated in a marine spatial plan. So very good question for discussion. Maybe Julian, would you like to come in on this question? Should we still treat conservation as a sector?
Yeah, that's an interesting one, because indeed, and we've just heard Joe talking about the outcome of a CBD process, and that global target of 30%, both in terms of conservation and now also restoration, which is also very important. So how does that translate in the national framework? And I think it's as we are integrating the concept of sustainability in the objectives of MSP plans, it's also potentially important to include those conservation goals into the overall objectives of a plan to really ensure that we are able to meet those targets by 2030 and 2050. So I think it has to be both a sector, because it's also a group of stakeholders, and we want those to be fully engaged in the process. But conservation needs to also translate in terms of goals and objectives at the MSP process level.
Wonderful. Elena, would you have some thoughts about the question as well, having a pretty large overview of the subject?
Yes, thank you so much. So indeed, as an environmental NGO, we have many opinions about this question. But obviously, when we follow an ecosystem-based approach to maritime spatial planning, it is implicit that the health of the ecosystems must lie as the foundation for any decisions on space allocation or activities and human pressures at sea. On this aspect, it's obvious that it's not just a sector, it's the foundation to a sustainable blue economy, and it's also a foundation to what allows human activities to continue to happen at sea. Nonetheless, there are still specific environmental policies that need to be considered, and MSP does not replace these environmental policies. There continue to be sectoral policies that are important to implement and take into account. So whereas the health of the ecosystems and is essential as the first step to study, to understand the impacts and the risks that come with different human activities, it's also important that the specific requirements regarding conservation and restoration are taken into account when designing a plan. So in this idea, it would still be important to consider nature conservation as one of the elements that need, or sectors, if you prefer that terminology, that need to be taken into account during the plan. I hope I was clear.
Thank you, Elena. And with that, I will wrap up this session. Really, really interesting, really great way to follow up our program. As you can see, there's lots of questions on Slido. I apologize due to the tight timeline that we won't be able to get to the other ones for now. All questions will be archived after every session, so don't worry, your questions will not be deleted. They won't disappear into thin air. They will just be archived so that questions for the next session can take place. And again, as I said, they will all be hugely informative to the MSP Global 2.0 team in formulating the project going forward. Thank you to speakers for this panel. Thank you very much. And I hope you'll stay with us for the remainder of the program. Now we can move on to session 3, joining forces to move the data value chain from ocean observation to knowledge-based MSP, discussing development of MSP MSP Global data toolboxes in synergy with other existing data initiatives. We'll have the following speakers on this session. Starting with a keynote from Andrei Abramich, researcher at the University of Las Palmas de Gran Canaria, and EU Technical Expert Group on data for MSP. Then following with a panel with Professor Nadia Pinardi from the University of Bologna, also part of the Coast Predict project of the Ocean Decade. Lotta Fyrberg, data manager and co-chair of the International Ocean Data Information Exchange, which is part of the IOC of UNESCO, and from the Swedish Meteorological and Hydrological Institute. And last but not least, Louis de Marne from IOC-UNESCO, who's helping to move forward the Ocean Decade data groups, and is Data and Knowledge Management Officer within the Ocean Decade Coordination team. If we could go straight to Andre for his keynote. Thank you very much, Andre, for joining us this morning.
Good morning. Good morning to everyone. Good morning to... okay. My name is Andre Abramic. I work in the Eco-Aqua Institute at University Las Palmas de Gran Canaria, and I would really like to thank you for this opportunity to provide brief presentation about Maritime Spatial Planning Data Framework, which is the latest product from the technical expert group on data for MSP. Next slide, please. So, technical expert group on data for MSP. It's established in April 2020 within the objective to support a European MSP process dealing with data management. Of course, issues related to the maritime spatial planning. This technical group is coordinated by European Commission, DG MARE and SINEA, assistant mechanism, and two co-chairs. One is the Ionica Iteranta from HELCOM and myself. The group has more than 50 members. 20 of them are really active, working on the task. Others are participating in the meetings, in the discussion, and providing their input. And everything is based on the voluntary participation. So far, we had 11 meetings, 3 workshops, and 1 thematic session within the MAPSIS conference last year. Next slide, please. So tech practically started in 2020. Within 2021, we had first results. We produced non-binding recommendations for developing the MSP data standard for developing European MSP data layer. Within the second cycle that started in the end of 2021, we complicated a little bit more things. We divided tech into 5 subgroups, and this year, we developed the metadata standard for maritime spatial plans. We analyzed how marine environment European regulation implementation can support maritime spatial planning process. We analyzed how network services can be used for MSP. We also had a study about the socioeconomical impact on maritime spatial planning and maritime spatial planning data framework. We will start our third cycle in October 2023. And the more info and overview of work of technical expert group with the result you can find on MSP platform that was previously included in the chat, the link. Next slide, please. So we are very happy that our product is practically used. We developed the data standard, and this data standard for maritime spatial plans is used within the MMF. So if you go on their portal, you can see maritime spatial plans for the whole Baltic almost, for a very big part of the North Sea. And recently, Spain actually was the first South European country that provided their plan, which also included partially part of the Mediterranean. And we expect that all European countries where they are going to be ready and finished, they are going to share it within the MMF. And we don't see the reason why this shouldn't be extended to whole Mediterranean and even non-European countries. Next slide, please. So the second product of the technical expert group is the Maritime Spatial Planning Data Framework. So what was the motivation for developing this framework? It was motivation to structure and organize input spatial information that is necessary for the MSP process. But we started to work on this in 2021. And at this moment, most of the European countries were finalizing or be very advanced within their plans. But we see that this framework can facilitate and structure data for the monitoring and evaluation of the operational plans. So this initiative actually started in 2017. It started for the practical reason within the Plasma cross-border project of Portugal and Spain, where we were developing the MSP analysis for the Micronesia, European Micronesia, for the archipelagos Azores, Madeira, and Canary Islands. So we developed this first Plasma MSP data framework to collect the data, and we had 5 clusters. First one was the marine environmental data, then we clustering the marine protected areas information, physical oceanography, coastal land use, and current maritime activities. This data framework was tested within the Plasma project. We successfully had a cross-border data collection process between the 3 archipelagos. We tested this framework for the suitability zone for different maritime sectors. And also we applied for the assessment of the results. Because we had a structured data collection, we can actually understand where we have data gaps and how this can apply and implicate within the results of the analysis. Next slide, please. So the first extension of this data framework was actually within the MSP Global Policy Brief, identifying existing and future condition maritime spatial planning. And it was also included in the international guide on international guide. So inside it was a published idea of the structured data collection for maritime spatial planning. And even the Plasma data framework, which was established in 2017, it was extended and it was included socioeconomic information and the governance information cluster. Next slide, please. And tech development started in 2021. It was established subgroup of the data framework. It was developed. It was analyzed already developed data collection within the national process of Poland, Greece, Italy, Sweden, and France, and also the other cross-border European projects. So this was the iterative testing, and practically we developed the current data framework, which has 7 clusters and related checklist. Next slide, please. So each cluster within the framework includes the checklist. So this is the list. This is the way how it's structured the each cluster within the data teams and data sets, and practically provide a list that should be considered. We are not saying that this data set and these data teams should be included and collected for the maritime spatial plans, but we are saying it should be considered if it's necessary to include and collect for your maritime spatial plan. So, Felix, I think I mentioned Marine Strategy Framework Directive and Good Environmental Status. So here for the marine and the coastal environment cluster, we included a checklist of good environmental status, but also checklist of good ecological status, which is coming from Water Framework Directive that actually measure the quality of the inland and the coastal water. So we have marine and the coastal environment cluster. We have marine and the coastal conservation and designated sites, which also includes the security and safety. Next slide, please. We include oceanographic characteristic and the climate. It is included also coastal land use cluster within the land planning, but also operative maritime activities and the maritime spatial planning if existing at the moment. Socioeconomic information and the governance information. So for each of these clusters, they are structured and included the checklist that should be considered and if necessary, included in data collection of the maritime spatial plan. Next slide, please. So the data framework is actually available for the 2 main uses. The first one is, as we said, MSP data collection. And for this, we developed the diagram, which actually requires that we follow the checklist of the data framework. And we try to identify data sets and data teams that are necessary to describe initial condition, special information to deliver analysis, and facts that are required for knowledge-based decision-making. One of the advantages of data framework is identification of the data gaps. So this framework practically allows to identify the data that are not included and not available for the process of the maritime spatial planning. But then we have opportunity to program future monitoring, survey, or we can actually try to find a proxy that can be maybe included in the later phase of the MSP process, but at least to be included for the process of the monitoring and evaluation phase. Next slide, please. The second way how to use the MSP data framework is the monitoring and evaluation. Again, we have a flow diagram. We are proposing to go through the checklist that can be followed. And following the checklist, we can identify data relevant for development of the MSP process, but that was not considered in the maritime spatial planning process previously. On that way, again, we can actually, this type of the data, if they're available, we can include it for the monitoring evaluation phase. But if not available, again, we have the possibility to program monitoring survey, or we can find the proxy, that this data set could be available for the monitoring evaluation process and for the iteration of the maritime spatial plan. Next slide, please. And final slide, I think. So the MSP data framework, we have a publication which is called MSP data framework, how to structure input data for MSP process monitoring and evaluation. It is available on the European CINEA publications, but also you can find it through the MSP data European MSP platform. And this product can be practically used to guide data collection for maritime spatial planning. Also, it structures input spatial information and data. It facilitates identification of the data gaps, as we saw within the diagram flows. Also identifies relevant information that is not previously included in the MSP process. And it's also the first milestone for MSP input data harmonization. Following this framework, it improves interoperability, and inside of the publication, it's included the structure and proposed harmonization, data models, and semantic codings. So following this, we can improve the comparability of applied data collections. We can improve the analysis potential and results comparability. And finally, we can support design for monitoring and evaluation. And final slide, please. So I would like to thank you for your attention. Here I included some links that will be useful, like where you can link for the European MSP platform, or where you can download this data product, and the number of the emails that, if you would like to contact technical expert group through the system mechanism or through the co-chairs of the technical group. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrei. Thank you very much for this presentation on, in particular, the Maritime Spatial Planning Data Framework. Very, very interesting. This is a complex issue. A lot of effort has already gone into trying to organize and put it neatly into a framework that hopefully will be taken forward in the new phase of the MSPglobal project. Now, we will group all questions from Slido at the end of the panel. So if we can already have our panel speakers all with us online, and I would like to throw in the first question, which builds on Andrei's presentation, which is MSPglobal 2.0 aims to develop data toolboxes in synergy with existing initiatives. Could you briefly describe the Ocean Data Initiative that you are involved in, and how can this benefit MSP practitioners, and how can MSP contribute to your respective initiatives? So we'll go around the panel. Professor Pinardi, maybe we'll start with you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me to this very challenging meeting and important meeting. So in the oceanographic community, we start from the basic hypothesis that only a science-based approach can support the proper governance in the marine environment. And MSP is clearly that approach. In the past 20 years, I just would like, already said by the keynote speaker, I'd like to inform you again that a silent revolution has occurred. Operational oceanography has established the real-time observing network, connecting it to forecast up to the reconstruction of the state of the ocean from observations and model for the approximately the past 100 years. So operational oceanography is now a reality at the level of global and basin scales, so the regional, but the EEZ is still a frontier scale. But the last mile is being delivered through the UN Decade. So the program that I'm privileged to chair, that is called the Coast Predict, is a UN Decade program, and I will put later the link to the program. We try to transform our understanding of that last mile, the EEZ mile, for the operational oceanography and our understanding of the multidisciplinary oceanography. So my sign here is that MSP practitioners should use the ocean prediction paradigm. Is a new paradigm for marine governance, meaning getting real-time data, getting forecasts, and getting reconstruction, optimal reconstruction of the state of the marine areas, especially in the EEZ. And operational oceanographers, on the other hand, but I see already from the keynote speaker, should organize their data and their products in specifically for the management of the open ocean. So this interlink. So in addition to my work in the Coast Predict, I'm also directing one of the new organizations that UN Decade is setting for having consultation with stakeholders. So we have Decade collaborative centers that should enforce the connection, the transfer, the new knowledge that the Decade is organizing to stakeholders, trying to shorten the time in which science will have an impact. So here we have, I'm also directing a Decade collaborative center for coastal resilience, is called. And this new infrastructure should be used by the growing activities of MSP Global program to interface properly the new science of the decade. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor.
Sorry for taking too long.
No, very, very interesting. Thank you. Ms. Ferberg, would you like to follow up to describe the data initiative in which you're involved and how it can benefit MSP practitioners?
Yes, I would like to strongly recommend the use of the global IOC-IOD systems that are developed, maintained, and updated regularly. IOD's purpose is to enhance marine research, exploitation, and development by facilitating exchange of oceanographic data and information between member states and by meeting the needs of users. In Europe, we have a long tradition of European projects on data management in close cooperation with the European Commission. This fosters a network of colleagues sharing experience, technical solutions, and working in the same direction. Recently, an EU project on marine spatial planning in Europe started, which aims to identify the locations within the European seas where marine protected areas, MPAs, would preserve the diversity of species, habitats, and ecosystems. This information is crucial to establish functional MPAs networks and will help managers to propose additional areas for conservation in the future. Data originates here from OBIS, the Ocean Biodiversity Information System, one of IOD's major program components.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And as an IOC-UNESCO man myself, I would very much reiterate, the quality of the data that IOD and OBIS have for MSP in particular. And now, Louis, over to you. Louis, I think we have a slight glitch with the microphone. It could be just me.
Oh, my bad.
Yeah.
I hit this little thing on the table. Sorry about that.
No
so
worries.
thank you very much. Thank you very much, Vinny, and hello, good morning, good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for inviting me on this panel. So I work within the Ocean Decade Coordination Unit, and within the framework of the Ocean Decade, it was recognized early on that data and information are cornerstones of the success of the decade, right? But we also recognize that with all of these channeled efforts on increasing our scientific understanding around ocean and finding these solutions for more sustainable ocean management, that we wanted to avoid a situation where we end up with a collection of disconnected, disparate databases, which is a little bit what the ocean data landscape resembles today, right? So how can we avoid that? And we came up with and developed this data and information strategy with a series of strategic objectives that collectively will allow us to develop a trusted, inclusive, and interoperable ocean data and information ecosystem, right? That is actively used for decision making. So that was a strategy that was published 3 months ago, and what we're currently developing is the action plan that will, what are these steps, the instructions, the actions that we need to take in order to reach this strategic objective. And these objectives are focused very much around the FAIR principles, so aiming to encourage and facilitate the discovery, the sharing, and the equitable access to multidisciplinary data and information, right? We talked about socioeconomic information as well as ocean data. And it's also focused around helping us to fill the data gaps, right, that are still out there, and also build a community of data and let's say data literate or digitally literate individuals that can see the value of data management, data sharing, and so on, right? So that's what we're working on right now. And how does what does this mean for MSP practitioners? Well, while this strategy was developed for the Ocean Decades, the ambition is that we use the decade as a means to transform the way we do things, right? So the ambition is that this strategy will also leave a legacy that goes beyond just the decade and beyond the 2030 deadline. And ultimately, for MSP practitioners, it should be a lot more simple to find the kind of baseline data sets and information products, including time series and Nadia talked about ocean prediction, and as well as other decision support tools and solutions. And so I really strongly encourage MSP practitioners to engage with some of these national, regional, and also the global data centers, data custodians, including the ones that from IOD that Lotte mentioned, to receive some guidance on how to do things, but also to ensure that the ocean data and information developed through MSP is made visible to the scientific community. Right? It's a two-way street.
Thanks very much, Louis. Yeah, the Ocean Decade is pulling in lots of efforts and collaborations around data to make sure that we have a full-fledged system operating seamlessly. Another question for the panel, and maybe we'll go in reverse order now. What are the obstacles? You know, we're all working on different initiatives, but with similar goals. Maybe it is that the obstacles are similar or intertwined. What are the obstacles to move the data value chain from ocean observation to knowledge base MSP? And would you have any suggestions for how we can overcome these obstacles in your specific fields of expertise and experience? Louis, let's start with you.
Right. Well, finding solutions is what the Ocean Decade is all about, isn't it? I think I'll point to a few things. Of course, the data strategy hopefully will make a lot of that ocean data findable and also will develop these solutions that will support activities like marine spatial planning. There's a few other things. You know, we talked about the theory of change management, right? Well, one of the pillars of that, and it was mentioned before, is communications. I think there's still a lot of work to be done in terms of building awareness of the benefits of MSP and getting buy-in. And, you know, it's the what's in it for me question that we need to present when we're communicating, right? What are the benefits of MSP? To increase that awareness, that understanding, and that buy-in. And I think with the growing momentum that we have around the understanding of ocean health and its importance that we have currently, you know, we have an opportunity to push that the communication forward. And the other aspect I think is it also mentioned earlier is the aspect of co-design. I think it's fundamental that even in MSP that we sit down with end users at the very beginning of an MSP project to understand what are the specificities, what are the needs, and that way we can build the MSP program and therefore find also the solutions that we need to develop and the data that needs to get input through that process, right? I think that's also fundamental, and I'll leave it at that.
Thanks very much. Lotta, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think that the need of networks with others working with the same type of problems is essential. And there are systems to find the data and information which has been developed by IOD, where you can find parts. And I think you have to start creating these networks.
Terrific. Nadia.
Yes, thank you. Well, I definitely share what it was said before, the previous. Make a point on that the state-of-the-art information for coastal governance comes from an optimal combination of observations and models. This progress, however, has been relatively slow. We have now, however, an historic moment that has been planned for us, and now it's happening, and it is the UN Decade, as it was briefly said. We are, scientists are put in front of the need for solutions based upon these systems, and the progress is becoming fast, and new technology are finally coming to have an impact on MSP, as we said, the last mile. So one point is that we need to be rational because everything is very expensive and requires a lot of human capital. So investing on human capital is my recommendation. On human capital that knows about the possibilities of science for MSP. That's first point, and that should be, and it is one aim of the UN Decade. The second point is we should use, since of this expensive ocean that we have to monitor and to plan, we should have as much as possible a multi-hazard system and use the multi-hazard system. So my last word is let's insert into the MSP, and I see already that there are symptoms of that. MSP, the ocean hazard community, which is the one that has developed most protocols for resilience in the coastal areas. So my advice is that we start to elaborate together with MSP multi-hazard community concepts that will strengthen MSP. At the same time, we are strengthening our resilience to coastal hazards.
Thank you, Nadia. I think those were really key points. And particularly one of the goals of MSPglobal project, starting the first phase and now much more in the second phase, is this building of human capacities, investment in human capital to create this community of MSP practitioners that are up to the task and well connected with the needs. So very good point there, and very good point on integrating the ocean hazard community. Now I'd like to go to question from Slido to get the most voted question for this session. So it's, with data as the biggest challenge and knowing MSP's final deliverable is not a zoning map, what data layers will prove or disprove that an MSP has been completed? Anyone would like to take that up from the panel? Nadia, I can see your...
Sorry, I cannot read well which one is the question that you were referring.
It's the first one. I will repeat. With data as the biggest challenge and knowing that MSP's final deliverable is not a zoning map, what data layers will prove or disprove that a marine spatial planning has been completed? I see Louis' hand is up.
Yeah, well, first of all, I don't know that a marine spatial plan is ever completed. For me, it's a living thing, right? It needs to evolve. That's the first thing. I think perhaps what the person is referring to is, at what point do you say, right, I've got my baseline and I can move forward? And I will simply go back to this idea of co-design, which is that we need to sit down with who are the end users of this MSP, figure out what are the priorities, and then build your data stack to be able to respond to the questions and the needs of those end users.
Terrific. We have time for one more input from one of the panel speakers, and then we'll have to move swiftly over. So would anyone like to give any closing remarks on this question specifically? Nadia, over to you.
Yes, I mean, this is a very good question, the one just Louis answered very properly. We are starting, the UN Decade will accelerate the co-design. It's really important. You might think we had it before, but we didn't really. And so this is a key. We also have to think that we can use an evolving MSP. The MSP does not end because new uses of the ocean are appearing all the time. What we have to keep in mind is that we have to be resilient and sustainable. And so we have to also think about the revision of our present users and data to support the users. That's my final.
Terrific. I'd like to thank all of our speakers in this session. Thank you very much for your contribution to the discussion, to this wonderful kickoff to MSPglobal 2.0. I think we've covered good ground introducing the project this morning, and now we are in for a very short break. So we'll have a 5-minute break for everyone to breathe a little bit. And during the break, I would like to propose to you to send your inputs to this question via Slido. In your opinion, what should be the priorities related to building knowledge and collaborations towards the success of MSP and SDG 14.2? Don't go away, don't go too far. Please send your thoughts. Again, this will be really informative for the team to build the MSP Global 2.0 project. So I hope you will tune into Slido during our short 5-minute break. We'll be back. Welcome, everyone. We're back from a short break. Just to remind you that we had a little question for you during break time. And we'll include a summary of your comments in the report of this event. And again, they will always be helping inform the MSP Global team in moving the project forward. And as we let everyone come back to the room, we'll gear toward our next session this morning, which is really going into the regional and South-South cooperation in the Gulf of Guinea and the Western Pacific, which are going to be the two key regions for the pilots of MSP Global 2.0. And we'll be discussing, how these pilots will be developed in synergy with, of course, existing and planned national and regional initiatives. For this session, we have with us a really great panel of speakers. We've got Jakub Isola, expert in integrated coastal and marine zones management from the Abidjan Convention Secretariat. We've got Felix Adoyobo, who's the Deputy Director and Advisor at the SDG's Advisory Unit at the Office of the President of Ghana. We've got Ziwei Zhang, Marine Spatial Planning Officer at the IOC-UNESCO Subcommission for the Western Pacific. And Suri Satapumin, Marine Resources Management Specialist at the Department of Marine and Coastal Resources in Thailand. Now we're going to jump straight onto the panel, and I'll be asking two questions, which I will invite all panelists to weigh in on. We'll start with you, Jakub. What are the current or planned MSP-related efforts in your country and in the region? If you could, give us an overview of what that's looking like.
Thank you very much. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. I will not speak about the country. I will speak about the region of the Abidjan Convention. The Abidjan Convention is covering 22 contracting parties, going from Mauritania to South Africa. So relating to MSP, we launched a call for proposal through a multilateral environmental agreement project funded by the European Union. And we ask for countries to bring up ideas and suggestions about ocean and coastal zone management. So out of the proposal we received, 4 countries decided to use MSP as governance tools. And then we signed a small-scale grant for these countries. Also, we support these countries with capacity buildings, with 2 centers of expertise, namely International Ocean Institute of South Africa for English countries, and we also use the Center for Suivi Ecology for French countries. So with these activities are ongoing now. We are also supporting some pilot activity on transboundary activity. We started with a Mami Water project, and the transboundary MSP are between Benin and Togo Republic, and also between Côte d'Ivoire and Ghana. Now, on support in collaboration with AU-IBA, we are now going on to finalize the activities on the marine spatial planning for the transboundary MSP between Togo and Benin Republic. So we have a set of activity ongoing through pilot support and also capacity buildings. Thank you.
Oops, even moderator has problems with the microphone. Thank you very much, Jakub. Now, Felix, would you like to give us your overview on MSP-related efforts in Ghana and in the region?
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much, and Vinicius, and good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever we are. Very honored to be part of this panel and to be part of the rich discussions that has gone on so far. I think Jacob has talked largely about the regional activities, which Ghana is happy to be part, especially the joint work we're doing with Cote d'Ivoire on our western border, which it's very instructive, and we're learning a lot of lessons from that. At the national level, we are at a very interesting time where we are now beginning to pay attention to the ocean and to the enormous potential that it holds to our socioeconomic development. Either to most of our development has been land-based, and a lot of attention has not been paid to the potential that the ocean derives, and we are turning that around now. And within that context, Ghana has pledged to put 100% of its maritime area under sustainable management practices by 2025. So we are in the process of developing a sustainable management plan. And a key component of this plan is the marine spatial plans. We did identify very early that in view of the increasing use of the ocean space, the increase in activities within the ocean space, and then emerging industries that are coming up, coupled with the poor state of health of our ocean, we need to adopt marine spatial planning as a tool to bring some sanity within the ocean space in terms of the use of the resources, the conservation of essential biological resources and ecosystems, to make sure that we are able to derive the optimum wealth and benefits that that inures to us from the ocean. Certainly, if we don't manage the ocean resources properly, the benefits will be short-lived. The potential socioeconomic development gains that we seek to get from the ocean would also be short-lived. And we see marine spatial planning as a key tool to achieve this. And then within the context of marine spatial planning, also mapping out marine protected areas to conserve and protect essential biodiversity within our ocean space. Aligned with this, we're also doing a lot of stakeholder engagement and collaboration, because we do acknowledge that there are a wide range of sectors involved in this endeavor, and then also several stakeholders, both from government, private sector, community, academia, all need to be on board. So we are having these conversations at the background to build a coalition of the willing people to move the agenda forward and make sure that we build on the pilot, the successful pilots that we had around the western end of the country, to build a good community of practice for MSP, and then also create marine spatial plans for the countries. The idea is not to cover the entire EEZ at a go, but then do it gradually, phase approach, identifying very sensitive areas, deal with those, and then based on the experience and knowledge and lessons learned, we can scale it up to cover the entire zone. Over.
Thank you. That's a lot of activity. Thank you for sharing those with everyone here today. We'll go to Ziwei Zhang to hear about what's happening in the Western Pacific.
Okay, thanks, listeners. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. I'm Ziwei Zhang from the Western IOC subcommission for the Western Pacific, acting as an MSP officer. So we're excited today to join this important conference, engage the MSP family from all over the world. Now, for the Western Pacific area, as we know, it's very important. It's the epicenter of the world's marine biodiversity. And on the other hand, it's also the home to nearly half of the world's population. So we think the conflicts and lots of the challenges here may be similar with some other places in the world, and maybe different, such as coastal degradation we're facing and coastal development. In fact, in the last, I think, more than 10 years, maybe for some countries, 20 years, they have did lots of more spatial planning theory and application research, both in national and international level. But the status of MSP development in this region, I think, in one word, is varies greatly from one country to another. In this area, such as China, Korea, and Indonesia have done lots of work. China has finished the third generation of MSP, and Korea published their own laws refer to marine spatial planning, and Indonesia also has its own MSP system. But in my opinion, some of the other countries in this area are still in primer states, but they are also doing this work to make some efforts to put forward marine spatial planning for their country. As I know, last week, the training course for trainers for MSP has been completed in Thailand. I think Sri will give more details about such information. So, as I would say some summation for Westpac in value of the demand of the member states at the 30th Intergovernmental sessions for joint initiative on marine spatial planning in April 2021, and the incubator program solution to the conflicts of ocean uses, accelerating marine spatial planning in the Western Pacific in the kickoff meeting of the UN Ocean Decade in the region. The IOC Subcommission for the Western Pacific, together with interested countries and their institutions, proposed a decade action entitled Accelerate Marine Spatial Planning in the West Pacific and its adjacent areas. Now, this proposal was officially endorsed and registered as the UN Ocean Decade Action 21. This also has been mentioned by the miscellaneous presentation at first. So the main activities of this action include establishment of a regional network of MSP experts and partners, MSP global adaptation and documentation. That's also the core of this project, and the transboundary marine spatial planning study from the value of large marine ecosystem, and also include the regional MSP form and capacity development. Right now, this action is put forward steadily. The working group has been established, and the first workshop will be held in November. So in a word, I think for our region, the MSP work is pushing forward steadily. And take this opportunity, I would also want to express our welcome for more regional countries and individuals to join this. And I stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Ziwei. Now, just to finalize this round of questions, we'll go to Thailand with Suri to give us an overview of MSP-related efforts in Thailand.
Yes, thank you very much for the question, and thank you for having me here to share information about MSP efforts in Thailand. And hello to everyone. MSP is an important component of Thailand's approach to sustainable use of marine space and resources. We have implemented MSP through a series of pilot projects in 3 areas, including 2 islands in the Gulf of Thailand and an enclosed bay in the Andaman Sea. The first MSP project was in Koh Lan, which is a small island in the eastern Gulf of Thailand. The project was undertaken within the framework of Thailand-China cooperation in 2016, aiming to address environmental degradation and resolve users' conflicts arising from marine tourism and recreational activities. For this site, the zoning scheme was categorized into 9 usage areas, and the proposed utilization areas are undergoing active development through the implementation of legislative measures implemented by relevant authorities. The second practice has been conducted at Got Si Chang, an island in the inner Gulf of Thailand, where the utilization of marine area presents a heightened level of complexity, including cargo ship traffic and anchoring, fisheries, tourism, and conservation activities. A notable concern for this site is on disposal of substances during the goods transferring procedures, specifically from barges to container carriers. This has led to issues related to contamination, deterioration in water qualities, and the potential impact on the nearby coral reef ecosystem. Currently, the development of a draft zoning scheme is in progress, proposing 4 principal zones to serve as strategic delineation aimed at harmonizing various activities and interests while fostering responsible marine management and safeguarding the ecological integrity of the region. And this project also under the framework of Thailand-China Cooperation and co-financed by China Ocean Development Foundation and Department of Marine and Coastal Resources of Thailand. In a concerted effort to extend the scope of MSP implementation, Phang Bay on the western coast of Thailand was selected for the 3rd site of MSP project. Phang Bay is home to a diverse range of marine and coastal resources, and it is also a popular tourist destination. The increasing maritime activity in the bay is putting a strain on the environment, and MSP can help to manage this activity in a sustainable way. The process of MSP in Phang Bay is still in its initial phase, but it is gradually moving forward. Baseline data has been collected and spatial maps have been created. An analysis of conflicts and compatibility related to human use is ongoing. Stakeholders are also being actively engaged in the process. In summary, the implementation of a national scale MSP in Thailand is still at an early stage. Although MSP has been endorsed within the National Reform Plan under the 20-year national strategy as a tool for managing marine and coastal resources, we have encountered obstacles and limitations. Key challenges encompass a limited understanding of MSP concept among the diverse stakeholders, deficient engagement of multi-sectoral authorities, and a lack of comprehensive high-level institution or governance structure. However, to conform the National Reform Plan, the establishment of an interministerial structure is designated in the form of a subcommittee for MSP under the National Maritime Interest Policy Committee. This subcommittee is acting as the coordinating body for national level MSP. While the complete formulation of the implementation of a comprehensive national MSP framework remains an ongoing process, the foundation for this initiative has been laid. We expect the development and implementation of this framework to become more visible and promising in the years to come. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Suri. And I will actually fire the next question to you as well. You talked about, a lot of the Thai initiatives around MSP. Now I would like to hear how you think that these initiatives can benefit from a collaboration with the new MSP Global project. You started talking a little bit about the pilot in Thailand. Can you give us a perspective on what does also Thailand hope to achieve from being part of the MSP Global project? What are these collaborations looking like?
Okay, thank you for the question. The MSP Global could collaborate with Thailand on MSP in various ways, such as providing technical assistance, sharing knowledge and experience, facilitating collaboration, as well as awareness raising. To specify further, MSP Global can offer valuable technical guidance in several key areas of Thailand. Firstly, it can provide expertise in developing criteria and a systematic protocol for selecting MSP sites. Next, MSP Global can offer advice on central database management, which is instrumental in enhancing the clarity and efficiency of MSP planning and implementation. Drawing from best practices in MSP from various countries, MSP Global can provide insights into institutional management and government improvement specific to MSP. And moreover, on-site consultation can yield unique perspective tailored to the specific needs and challenges in each area, as different regions often grapple with distinct issues and conflict related to marine users. The collaboration would well align with the upcoming project in Thailand supported by the World Bank through the Pro Blue Trust Fund on technical support on sustainable blue economy and integrated seascape management, which will start very soon. And not least, it will also support the decade action of MSP under the IOC Westpac, as Dr. Shuai has mentioned earlier. By collaborating with MSP Global, Thailand can benefit from the organization's expertise and experience in MSP. This can help us to develop and implement a successful MSP process that will protect our marine resources and promote sustainable development. Thank you.
Thank you, Suri. Felix, I'd also like to hear about how you think that the MSP Global project can be intertwined, develop collaborations with the ongoing MSP efforts in Ghana.
Yeah, thank you, Vinicius, and thank my colleague from Thailand has literally taken the wind out of my sail and said most of the things are noted down. But 2 or 3 additional points I think worth mentioning. Yeah, in addition to the knowledge and experience sharing, we're looking at capacity building, which include identifying courses and programs for people interested in MSP to attain and to hone their skills and expertise in this field, who will then come back to lead or take a very key role in MSP processes in Ghana in the long term. We are also interested in the M&E tools to be able to effectively monitor and evaluate the progress of implementation and then feedback these lessons into the iterative process of updating and revising the MSPs as we go on. For Ghana, in as much as we wholly believe in the scientific evidence and scientific approach to the MSP, we also don't want to lose sight of the rich indigenous and traditional knowledge that has been used over the years to manage the ocean. So we'd want to be able to capture these, document them, and put them in a form that would be easily accessible to many, so that it complements whatever the scientific community is also bringing on board. We think there's a lot to learn from traditional practices, indigenous knowledge that we just can't throw away. We need to get that on board. And then last but not the least, where the rubber hits the road, financing. One of the activities we want to undertake as part of the MSP is to have a robust and sustainable financing model for the MSPs, so that it's not come the end of this project, we don't throw our arms around and say there's no resources to sustain the process. So we are thinking along the lines of investment opportunities aligned to the MSPs. How can we craft out investment opportunities that will be attractive to the private sector, to get private sector to invest in these areas that will then support MSP's activities going forward? I don't have a solution. I don't have the answer, but I think as we collaborate on this, we should be able to come up with innovative ways of attracting private sector investment into the MSP process. Thank you, and over.
Terrific. Thank you, Felix. Now, switching to the regional perspective from both Western Pacific and the Abidjan Convention member countries. Ziwei, could you give us your perspective regionally? How does MSP Global benefit ongoing efforts?
Okay, thank you. Thanks for your question. Absolutely, I do think MSP Global could enhance our efforts in the region. I think firstly, because MSP Global is 2.0, is an extension of MSP Global, which lasted from 2018 to 2021. This will be helpful for the region understand where the MSP, understand where the guide of international MSP and MSP roadmap. Aiming to the SDGs, more and more countries, they should take this tool for coastal and marine management, especially for the country which have limited knowledge and limited work. I think MSP Global will improve the mission for the country, for the government to let them know the importance of this work. Because from some other sessions, we also talked about that more and more international agreement and documents also have improved the level of the MSP. This is first I want to say. And secondly, I do think MSP Global 2.0 would be very helpful for the capacity building in the region. In December 16 last year, a Westpac regional MSP dialogue was held online to discuss the status and the challenges of MSP in the region. An outcome mainly include, just like the first question, yes, we have some countries did lots of work in this field, but the MSP development in most of the countries in this region are still at its early stage. We think the impediments identified from the form include, but not limited to, lack of policy framework, lack of national authority in charge of MSP, limited technological and human capacity, and limited access to data and information, and also limited engagement of the public and financial sustainability. So it is important to work closely with MSP practitioners in each country to understand first their situation, have identified needs, co-design and co-develop MSP and associated activities to serve their priority interests. And we think MSP could provide technology for assessment, for training, and some other aspects in the region. So I think it's important. And last but not least, I do think MSP Global will complement with the regional work and accelerate marine spatial planning in the region and worldwide. As we know, MSP is a tool. That's a policy for the country. So that's not only a technology problem, it also should be changed to the regulations for the coastal and marine management. So that's also a good case that science support policy. So the destination is the country could approve and implement it. From this value, global level, regional level, and even country level should work together. For global level, provide a theory and guide for this work, and regional level could push forward and adapt it based on the regional situation. So in the country levels could develop and implement MSP. So these three levels should collaborate and achieve the final target of our MSP Global Initiative. So that's my opinion. Thanks.
Thank you, Ziwei. And swiftly on to Jakub.
Thank you very much. I will not come back to all what have been said by the other speakers, but I want to focus on some main advantage the Abidjan Convention is looking from the collaboration with the MSP Global 2. If you look the Abidjan Convention, we are covering 22 countries. And this project has two components, a regional aspect and a national aspect. On the regional aspect, it will help us have the same tool co-developed with the 22 countries at the same time. This MS2 Global Project 2 will help us harmonize the tools and the capacity building we are doing in the region. That is very important for us. And what we want to add to this is that as the project is for 1.5 years, we want the team to have a very solid relationship with our Center of Expertise that are International Ocean Institute of South Africa and the Centre of Civil Ecology of Senegal, for them to master these tools so that when the project finishes, they can continue and strengthen the capacity of our countries. At the national level, we are more than happy that the 4 countries chosen, likely Benin, Cote d'Ivoire, Ghana, and Togo, are the 4 countries we are developing transboundaries MSP with. So we think that by having this project, it will enhance the activities we have already started. And I think by the end of the project, we will be able to finish what we are doing with these countries relating to finalizing the MSP project we started already. So we are more than happy for this project in the Abidjan Convention region. It will be a very good support for us and for our countries supporting. Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you, Jakob. Just to go back to one point that Felix mentioned about the importance of keeping in mind indigenous knowledge. The next session is going to be all about that. Not all, but largely discussing that specific theme. So I think that was a very good probing into the next part of the program. But before we go there, I'd like to call on the most voted question from Slido to our panel. If we can have Slido up on the screen. So from Professor Zakaria Sohu, what is the status of Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire transboundary MSP? So I guess that would be for Felix and Jakob, if that comes under the Abidjan Convention. I'll let you guys come forward if you want to weigh in on this question.
Okay, thank you. I will give some small point on discussion. I want to say that the pilot transboundary project was started with the Mami Water project, and this project ended in 2001. So the activity stopped there. But what we are doing now, we are mobilizing additional resources through a commitment with the World Bank so that we can start, we can update these activities we have already started and go on with it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jakob. Felix, any words?
To add to it, so just like what I alluded to, once the project comes to an end, everything comes to a standstill, and the Mami Water project was a typical example. So not much has been done on that front on the transboundary issues between Ghana and then Cote d'Ivoire. But Ghana is just at the final stages of securing some support from the World Bank for the West Africa Coastal Resilience Program. And as part of that, there's a component for marine spatial planning. And with that funds available, we will revisit the work that was done between Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire and then build upon that. And where possible, we may explore opportunities of doing similar with our eastern neighbor, which is Togo. And this all falls within the big framework of the Ghana Sustainable Ocean Plan arrangement. Over.
Terrific. Thank you very much. I look forward to that funding becoming available and for us to hear more about the Ghana Cote d'Ivoire transboundary MSP, as well as all the other actions in both regions that we heard from everyone. I'd like to thank all the speakers in this panel for participating, for sharing your thoughts and your hopes for MSP Global 2.0. And with that, we'll wrap up this session and move on to session 5, on, as I said previously, incorporating indigenous people's knowledge and also highly important gender-sensitive approaches into marine spatial planning. So joining us for this session, we have two keynote presentations from Sarah Singh, who's technical officer at the Guyana Marine Conservation Society, and Zen Soon, who's associate professor at the World Maritime University. I would like to invite Sarah to give her keynote presentation.
Thank you, and greetings all.
Hi, Sarah.
Once again, greetings everyone. I will be focusing on indigenous people's knowledge and engagement in marine policies. My presentation will be done using images because I believe a picture can tell 1,000 words. Next slide, please. The Guyana Marine Turtle Conservation Society was founded in 2000 and was the lead agency in implementing the Sea Turtle Conservation Program at Shell Beach from 2000 to 2011. The area, which is inhabited by the Arawaks or the Lakonos, the Caribs or the Kalinas, and the Waro indigenous people, later became the first coastal protected area, and an annual no-fishing zone was secured from the Ministry of Agriculture to reduce incidental mortality of sea turtles. Consultations and education and awareness programs were targeted to the indigenous peoples of the area as they had direct contacts with the turtles, from hunting them to eventually protecting and advocating for them. The use of traditional knowledge played an integral role in these processes. Fast forward to 2016, the Guyana Marine Turtle Conservation Society expanded its focus to the Guyana Marine Conservation Society and focused on all things marine. The organization's efforts included replanting 500,000 mangrove seedlings, which paved the way for more than 500 hectares of mangroves being generated naturally. Researches were done on the impacts of a growing oil and gas sector on Guyana's marine vessel traffic from 2015 to 2020, and this was presented to the Minister of Agriculture. Next slide, please. GMCS then began working in the Bremer-Moore Passage area, which is adjacent to the Shell Beach Protected Area. It is 50,000 hectares, of which 14,000 hectares are mangroves. It is populated with Arawaks, Caribs, and Waro people. Environmental and biodiversity studies, such as the water quality test, mammals and bird surveys, and fish and crab assessments were conducted and involved indigenous youths as local counterparts. Their roles were integral in determining sample insights, identifying species and animal tracks, navigating the mangrove forest, and more. These scientific researches are pivotal in justifying to policymakers why this large mangrove ecosystem and carbon sink is important and deserves some sort of protection. Next slide, please. Throughout the years, GMCS has been strategically working to support Guyana's low-carbon development strategy 2030. Guyana is committed to balancing its non-renewable energy resources with carbon reduction, and this is aligned with the conservation of critical and valuable carbon sinks like the Bremer-Moore Passage. Our project activities are supported by a range of national policy enablers related to LCDS 2030, and Guyana's international commitments to several international conventions that influence marine and coastal biodiversity protection and management. The LCDS 2030 requires the development of village improvement plans for indigenous communities, which GMCS has been aiding with by providing guidance and resources to get them completed. A priority for the LCDS 2030 is the leadership of women and girls in climate action, and I'm so proud to say that all of our project activities target at least 70% of women and youths. Monitoring feeds into the implementation of the low-carbon development strategy, which builds on the national scale monitoring, reporting, and verification system by the GFC, the Guyana Forestry Commission, which we are collaborating with to implement a community monitoring and reporting and verification system in the Bremer-Moore Passage. Finally, GMCS will be collaborating to provide the marine scientific data needed by the Protected Areas Commission to reach their 30% of Ghana being under protection by 2030 goal. Next slide, please. The Ghana Marine Conservation Society is establishing conservation efforts in the Bremen-Moore Passage through these three components, which aim at securing the future of the Bremen-Moore Passage mangrove ecosystems and its people. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Thank you. In the community and stakeholder awareness and engagement component, a communication and engagement strategy was produced to guide the community consultations, school outreaches, and wildlife clubs. Booklets, animated videos, radio, documentaries, and even social media will be used to raise awareness on the natural resources of the area. A natural resource management committee comprising of representatives from the community and relevant agencies was set up to co-manage the area. In the training and support for green enterprise development, a marine and coastal focused research center was established. A pepper processing initiative comprised of indigenous women was implemented. The first indigenous girls drone unit in Guyana was formed, and in the near future, a beekeeping and honey processing initiative will be implemented. These green businesses serve as alternative livelihoods for the people who depend on the mangrove forest in the Bremen-Moore Passage, while they'll collaborate to protect the valuable ecosystems. Next slide, please. Finally, in the development of ecosystem management and monitoring systems, a blue carbon baseline will be established. A CMRV system will be designed and piloted. A community co-managed plan will be developed. A sustainable financial management system for blue carbon or natural capital inflows will be developed. And a capacity building program to manage and invest inflows of carbon credit and other funding from public and private, national and international organizations will be implemented. For these three components, the indigenous people of the Bremen-Moore Passage will be consulted and involved with the objective of developing a co-management system for the Bremen-Moore Passage with policymakers. Their rich traditional knowledge and experience in the marine space, especially the mangrove forest, is invaluable in creating and implementing policies and plans for its protection. Next slide, please. Some principles, good practices, and recommendations when engaging with indigenous peoples are to learn the rules, the governance, and authority structure in the communities before engaging with the villagers. Exercise free, prior, and informed consent at all times. Create an engagement plan before engaging with indigenous peoples. This would include determining effective communication channels as well. Use integrated and inclusive approaches. Conducting thorough consultations until results are achieved. Having focus groups during consultations, for example, men, women, youth, and elders. Using fit-for-purpose educational workshop materials. Choosing appropriate time and days to conduct consultations. Having translators present during engagements. Involve relevant stakeholders at all levels through the engagement process. Involve children as well, especially during the awareness session. Engage with community groups such as the church, fishermen groups, youth groups, etc. This depends on the aim of your objectives, of course. Conduct house-to-house visits if persons aren't attending community consultations or meetings. Respect the people, their culture, and their opinion. And finally, build healthy relationships in the community. Next slide, please. Indigenous people have traditional knowledge and experience that can be used integrally in creating or maintaining marine policies once they're engaged with to do so. Thank you for listening to my presentation.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Really interesting to hear. Also hear the experience from Guyana. As a Brazilian, I'm very much interested in what happens in the region when it comes to that, and I think we have also great experiences in Brazil, so it resonates a lot personally with me. We can now shift to another equally important framework, which is gender-sensitive approaches to MSP. So I have the pleasure of yielding the floor to Professor Zensun to her presentation, and afterwards we will take Slido questions for both speakers.
Thank you very much, moderator. Thank you for the organizers for giving me this opportunity to share some of the work that we are taking at the World Maritime University. So the topic I'm going to share with you is another one relating to the human element in developing and implementing marine policy, which address specifically to the discrimination against and as well as underrepresentation of women in the decision-making and implementation process. Next slide, please. I think a lot of the recommendations presented by Sarah applies to the gender-sensitive approach as well in a different context. I don't have a specific case study in this presentation. So what I will do is probably do overarching framework to discuss why we talk about this topic, what it is, and how to adopt this approach. Next slide, please. Before getting on to the specifics, what I want to do is to put us back into a more general context. There are many studies justifying why we need gender equality, what are the benefits that it can bring to the society, to human development. What I want to add on to that voice is that we need to acknowledge that women's rights are human rights. As early as when we codification of these legal recommendations on addressing human rights, it was specifically recognized all human beings are born equal in dignity and in rights. The UN specifically included a provision in the Charter of the UN that they should place no restriction on the eligibility of women and men to participate in any capacity and any conditions of equality. So even without those fancy adjustment to say that what women brings into the table, we should not neglect the fact that women represent the other half of the population. And right now, in order to address the crisis that brought to us faced by the ocean, we need all hands on deck. This is specifically recognized in the SDGs, as well as the work undertaken by the UN and the UN Decade of Ocean Science. The word that we frequently refer to, gender, is actually a social contact. And it is the characteristics of men and women that we oftenly associated with specific gender, and it is context specific, and it could change over time, could change in the different social context. As we have already observed, gender has already moved beyond the traditional binary definition. Now it includes transgender, gender neutral, and other people associated with different categories of genders. The term gender equality, as being traditionally used to describe the binary definition of gender, it refers to giving the same status, having same opportunity to realize all genders' human rights, the potential to contribute to society, to all aspects of society and cultural development, as well as to benefit from this result. Historically and currently representing the majority of the work, we often link closely gender equality and women's empowerment. This is specifically given to the context we recognize at the starting point that women are disproportionately affected by inequality in gender perspectives. Next slide, please. This study is provided by OECD, and the study has been the basis to assess the progress on SDG 5 used by the UN. It was a study conducted in 2019 by the results submitted by 197 countries. If you may focus on Table A on the left-hand side, it gives you the general understanding of the regional representation of discrimination against women in different society dimensions. Overall, the worldwide number is close to medium, on the very high end of close to medium level of discrimination against women. The one note I want to put on is this is a region specific, and it does not take into consideration of the population, the society level of women's engagement, but it gives you the perspective of where we are from the gender, from the regional perspective. On the right-hand side, closely linked to today's topic, which is on developing and implementing marine policy, which involves women's role and representation in decision-making positions. So I took out from the women's political engagement in the society, which is women's participation in parliament. So the darker blue is where we are over the historical data. The lighter blue is a projection. As you can see clearly from here, it is estimated that we need 40 years just to reach the number parity on the representation of women in decision-making roles. Now, this is only one element that we often start with numbers, although there are so many layers that we need to go behind the numbers. So if we move down to the bottom part on the right side, we can see nearly 60% of the country responded to the questionnaire. They only have less than 30% of women's taking up the cabinet ministers' roles. If we look deeper beyond this, on the right-hand side of the bottom part, we can see what are the specific roles that women undertaken. So here in the decision-making part, we see women occupy the position mainly relating to those traditionally roles that is being associated to women, which are women, gender equality, family, and children's affairs. Again, if we want to go deeper to this, we could actually find out what kind of level of position that they are holding against these numbers. Next slide, please. This picture, I think what I want to draw your attention is a study show that how women are contributing and participating in different elements of the ocean affairs. We have, under our program specifically, questioned the number of women scientists in this perspective, which are, the number was only taken in participation in international conferences. It did not consider what role they play. They could be participants, but they didn't take into consideration of the decision-making, the keynote speakers. The key point from this slide is overall, we need to acknowledge that women are participating in and contributing to every aspect of ocean affairs. Nonetheless, women's contributions are under-recognized and they are significantly underrepresented in different sectors. So that's sort of sum up where we are and why we need to really pay attention to who are the decision makers and the implementation of the ocean policies. Next slide, please. Before assessing that, to say that whether a policy that need to be gender sensitive to take into consideration of this approach or not, when analyzing marine policies or policies in general, we tend to divide them into gender blind and gender aware. For the gender blind, which refers to the policies that does not acknowledge or recognize the inequality between different genders, that carries as business as usual. For gender aware, that obviously in contrast to not acknowledging this dynamics, this power in inequality between different genders, that under the gender aware category, we can still distinguish them between three levels. That is exploitive, which is capitalizing on the inequality between genders and in a way contributing or strengthening the inequality between different genders. The next level is accommodating, which recognizes the differences but does not specifically address the inequality among genders. The last category is where we are aiming at, is to achieve a transformative policy that not only recognizes the differences, but take deliberate action to address those inequalities. The final goal of this movement or this dynamic changes is to reach gender equality. That is, to recognize their equal rights, give them equal opportunities to both contribute and benefit from society development. So gender-sensitive approach and tools should fall under the transformative policy approach. For that, we said that the current effort has been mainly to address inequality against women's participation and representation. So for good gender-sensitive approach, it should be recognizing these differences, highlight or understand what are the systemic barriers that hindering women's empowerment in order to address them. Next slide, please. As a general rule, just following from the last slide, need to understand what are the major causes. So from the index that are provided by OECD, what we see on the surface is the outcomes that women are underrepresented, that there is an inequality in the decision-making process. But what are the undercutting or the root cause of these phenomena? So in order for policy that to adapt approach to address these causes, it need to understand in a specific context what are the root causes within the organization itself. So on the text side that I draw, the general perspective or say a guiding principles how to design a gender-sensitive approach. So it would start from assessment exercise that really identifies the vulnerabilities, what are the barriers that really hinder women's representation and the empowerment. When we understand what is the status quo, what are the situations, then we need to engage a gender-sensitive assessment, planning, monitoring, evaluation process. During this process, it is key, like Sarah mentioned with indigenous knowledge, to involve the stakeholders every step of the way to make sure that their needs and consideration are taken into consideration and being reflected by the development of the gender of the marine policies. When it's only when we get to that level, there can only be designed specific practice that to empower women, and those would be gender responsive policies, implementation of those beautifully adopted international rules and declarations, how to transform them into a local operational level, and capitalize on the institutional capacity. I think Sarah also mentioned this, to have specific budgeting and the capacity development strategies that to empower women in the process. Next slide, please. In the next slide, I think I want to share a case study that has implemented a gender-sensitive approach, which was taken from UNFCCC, the climate change framework, that when they design climate change adaptation process. So in order to adopt a gender-sensitive approach, the most important thing is to have this enabling environment for us to be able to talk about this topic, to incorporate a gender-sensitive approach in the designing of the policy. The middle part represents the 4 key parameters when adopting and implementing gender-sensitive approach. It will be starting from a gender-sensitive assessment to understand the climate change vulnerabilities, the impacts and opportunities for women's participation in the process of climate change adaptation actions. In the planning and designing process, like the general guidance presented from the previous slide, is to involve women's participation every step of the way to make sure that their needs and their contributions are taken into consideration in the process. So for this to be more effective, there are also specific criteria has been adopted along the planning process, that is to assess, monitoring and evaluate the effect of these policies on the development and implementation of climate change adaptive activities. As also to ensure the coherent and continuity of gender-sensitive approach throughout the process, there's a management component, which is the last one. It has been set up, including specific and time-bound adaptation process and effort. Next slide, please. So if we recall in the 1995, which is also a turning point for women's representation in decision-making process, that is women's empowerment and their full participation on equity should involve women's participation in decision-making process and access to power. And this has been recognized as fundamental for achieving gender equality and development and the world peace. So what I want to highlight here for developing marine policy that taking into consideration of gender element is first to establish a gender enabling environment. And that is the key for any action that can be taken in the development and implementation process. The elements of establishing this need a strong political commitment. We have established legal and policy frameworks, and also to thinking about changing the organizational culture, the working environment, layered by or guaranteed by the accountability and the responsibility process, supported with designated technical capacity, finance, and adequate human resources to achieve this goal. So for the last slide, next please. I want to share with you a work that we've been undertaking under the Empowering Women program. If you are interested, you can find us on the Ocean Decade Network, which is a gender equality strategy and action plan. We've been developing it in collaboration with several international organizations and NGOs to understand their practice and relevant recommendations. So the current strategy action plan consists 5 major parts. In each of these sections, we have specific criteria and elements to identify the good practices, how to improve women's participation in the process. We're welcoming comments, and if you are interested, please get in touch. And thank you for your attention and for the opportunity to share our work with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor. We now have the opportunity of getting the most voted question from Slido for each of our keynote presenters. So if we can have Slido up on the screen. So first one, which goes to Sarah. How do we ensure that indigenous knowledge, rights, and processes, which are mostly informal, are successfully factored into statutory MSP processes? Sarah, over to you.
Thank you for that question. How do we ensure that indigenous knowledge, rights, and processes which are mostly informal are successfully factored into statutory MSP processes? I think my answer to that would be to continuously consult or include the indigenous people in the MSP processes. I know to do something or to have a plan, you need to have steps leading up to the final decision. You need to have meetings, you need to have consultations, and it would be a good opportunity for indigenous people to use or to include their traditional knowledge in these consultations or meetings. So I think my answer to that would be to continuously include them in the processes.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you very much. And now we've got a question for Professor Zensun. Let's see, are there any international studies that identify differences between genders in terms of what they value most when it comes to benefits from marine resources? This is a really interesting question.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you for the question. I think I don't recall any study that's specifically relating to their how they benefit from different resources. I think the most successful one so far in the marine and environment context is the studies undertaken by UNFCCC. I think so far they have been used as one of the most successful cases of involving women in decision-making process as well as implementation process. So I think perhaps have a look at UNFCCC's work relating to this topic. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you both for participating in this session, which I will now bring to a close. We are almost on time, and we still need to wrap up, close this wonderful kickoff event for the MSP Global 2.0 project. And before we go into the actual closing, I would like to give the floor to Laura Stotuczky. Sorry, Laura, for completely blastering your name. Policy Officer at the European Commission's Directorate-General for Maritime Affairs and Fisheries, DG MARE, and afterwards we'll hear again from Michele. Laura, over to you.
Thank you, Vinci. I thank you, everybody, for participating in this conference.
We may be experiencing...
yes, it was a blackout. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, so I will just continue. I don't see, but I will just continue to talk.
Thank you.
Seeing everybody in here and how nice all the speakers and everybody spoke, I can see that I'm humbled by all the collective knowledge and passion and dedication that I've seen today. And the presentations were interesting and illuminating. Discussions were constructive, and the result was just admirable. And first and foremost, indeed, we cannot escape the fact that we are behind the schedule in our efforts to sustainably manage and protect our marine and coastal ecosystems. And the signs of distress are there, but I really believe that maritime spatial planning, even though it's not a panacea, but it's definitely a remedy. And all of the issues that we talked today, the transboundary cooperation and the inclusion of the indigenous knowledge and inclusion, gender equality in decision making, and the data, a need for data-driven decisions in maritime spatial planning. These are just the ingredients of that remedy that we could develop, and hopefully that it will be the remedy amongst others. And in conclusion, looking at all the interest that this conference raised, all of the people in the chat saying where they are from, what they are doing, it shows this, all the speakers, and it shows this incredible commitment and the potential for positive change that we are facing now. And I would say that there is some certain momentum gathered now for maritime spatial planning everywhere, looking at all the programs that exist and ongoing. And so let us leave this conference with a renewed determination to accelerate maritime spatial planning nationally, regionally, and in the end globally, with the MSP Global and other initiatives that exist. In the end, the goal is the same. And so thank you all for this, for participation, for dedication, for passion and contributions. And I wish you all a very good day, evening, or night, wherever you are. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Laura. Huge thanks for your participation here today to close the event. And now, without further ado, Michele, over to you for closing remarks.
Thank you, Vinny, for giving me the floor. I think Laura did a very good wrap-up of the key topics that we discussed today. And this is just the kickoff of the discussions regarding these topics. And I will, on behalf of IOC-UNESCO and the MSP Global team, I would like to also thank all the participants for the exchange of knowledge, both from the speakers in their interventions, but also, as Laura mentioned, the chat was very live. People, they were sharing their experiences in the different regions of the world. And I think this is the beauty of MSP Global. It's not only the building knowledge, but really sharing knowledge. And we will close the event with a last question to the audience. So if our colleagues can share the PPT again. We will have this question during the whole day open to you to answer. As we are kicking off the project, we really want to hear what are your expectations and recommendations for this new phase of the project. So if you can answer it now, good. If you want to answer it after lunch, good as well. We'll have the whole day to answer this question to us. Thank you so much. And I will give the floor back to you, Vinny.
Thank you, Michele. So with this last question on Slido, what are your expectations and recommendations to MSP Global 2.0? We are closing this wonderful kickoff event, kickoff session for a very, very busy and productive 1.5 years of the next phase of the MSP Global project. Big thanks to the UNESCO technicians, to the interpreters for making this event possible and available and accessible to all of you and people across the globe. I was really, really happy to see the diversity of national backgrounds, of interests in the chat. Really great. Before you leave, we'll launch up a poll question on Zoom. So there's one question on Slido, but there's also here in front of you a poll on Zoom for you to evaluate the event before leaving. It's really great for us to have your feedback. And it's goodbye from me and from the team. Stay tuned to the MSP Global website, social media, newsletter. There's lots of ways to follow the project, to follow its development, and you can be a part of it. We're really welcoming feedback, and we hope and count on your participation going forward. Thank you very much.